They said the fire cleansed everything, but some things don't burn, not the smell of blood soaked into old wood, not the whisper of children who never should have been born. Bell River Plantation, Alabama, 1847. Two sisters standing side by side at the edge of a flooded field, their white dresses reflecting the silver light of a swollen moon. Behind them, a man stands motionless, not because he wants to, but because he's been told to. Marcus, the man neither of them could own completely, yet both believed they had a right to. They were twins, identical in face but not in spirit. Clara was ice-calculated, cold, silent as the grave. Eliza was fire-jealous, impulsive, obsessed with possession. But together they were something else entirely, two halves of the same hunger. When Colonel Sutton, their father, died that spring, he left them the plantation and all who lived on it. But what the county never knew was that one of the assets he listed wasn't a man at all in the way they meant it. He was their obsession, their sin, and their mirror. They made him part of their rivalry, a cruel, forbidden game of control, of testing how far a man's will could bend before it broke. And one night, both sisters whispered the same words to him under the same roof. Words that would alter generations. When the fire finally consumed Bell River 2 years later, the town called it an accident. But among the ashes, 3 bodies were found chained beneath the floor. One set of bones was larger male. The other 2, identical. People still say you can hear their laughter on windless nights, echoing from the blackened cotton fields. But what they never tell you is why that fire started. Because once you understand that, you'll understand the true curse of the Sutton Twins and the bloodline that was never meant to exist. Before the fire, before Marcus, before sin became ritual, there was a house that taught 2 little girls that love was power, and power was cruelty dressed as grace. Clara and Eliza Sutton were born into wealth and silence. Their mother, Margaret, died before they turned 7. Her absence was treated like an inconvenience, not a tragedy. The colonel raised them as soldiers of refinement, perfect in posture, ruthless in speech, untouched by emotion. He believed sentiment was weakness, that a woman's true weapon was her ability to command without conscience. At Bell River Plantation, even the wind obeyed. The slaves rose before dawn and spoke only when spoken to. Punishment was public and precise. The twins watched everything, their blue eyes mirroring the cruelty of the man who created them. But inside, something darker grew, something not even their father understood. They didn't compete for love because none was given. They competed for control. When one cried, the other smiled. When one was praised, the other plotted revenge. By 13, they had learned to command the overseers themselves, issuing orders in voices too calm for children. And then came Marcus. He wasn't from Bell River. He'd been purchased from a neighboring plantation after an outbreak of fever. The colonel saw strength in him, broad shoulders, quiet defiance, the kind of man whose silence unnerved others. He made Marcus a stable hand, thinking obedience would follow. But Marcus didn't break. He listened, he watched, and in the shadows of the stables, the twins began to notice him too. Eliza first. She'd linger while he worked, inventing reasons to speak, a torn ribbon, a missing brooch, a question that didn't need answering. Then Clara, who never lost, began to do the same. They started writing in secret, exchanging letters as if the man were a game piece in their private war. Each one dared the other to go further. Each one wanted to be the first to make him submit. It wasn't love. It was a reflection of the house they'd been raised in, where control was currency and affection a weapon. And Marcus became the currency of their corruption. The seeds were sown long before the fire ever burned, and once those seeds took root, nothing human remained in that house again. By the spring of 1848, Bell River was no longer a plantation, it was a stage. Every smile was performance, every glance was strategy. Clara and Eliza had turned the house into an arena where desire, control, and punishment were indistinguishable. It began with silk, a ribbon left on Marcus's pillow after midnight crimson, smelling faintly of magnolia and smoke. He didn't know which sister had placed it there. That was the point. In the morning, both of them wore matching ribbons around their necks, smiling over breakfast as if nothing had happened. The following week, Marcus found a note folded beneath his plate in the kitchen. Loyalty, it read, is proven in silence. There was no signature, only a single fingerprint in wax. For the next several months, the twins orchestrated a slow psychological siege. They would summon Marcus at odd hours for tasks that didn't exist: a window to be closed, a lamp to be lit, a book to be retrieved from the library where neither had been reading. Each encounter became a test of will. Each gaze, a provocation. Marcus knew the danger. A single accusation could mean death, yet he also knew the unspoken truth. Power in that house was shifting. The colonel had grown sickly, withdrawn. The twins were assuming command. The overseers answered to them now, not to him. Marcus began writing at night, short fragments, scratched onto scraps of ledger paper, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the stable. He wasn't documenting his servitude. He was mapping corruption, one calculated gesture at a time. He described their voices, their mirrored cruelty, the way one would smile while the other whispered commands, the way they used affection as punishment and silence as seduction. And then came the moment that sealed everything. One evening, Clara dismissed the servants early and summoned Marcus to the parlor. The firelight glowed low against velvet drapes. She told him to sit, a command no slave would ever obey. When he hesitated, she smiled. "Do you understand?" she whispered, "that obedience is the highest form of desire?" From that night on, the sisters no longer sought his obedience. They fought for it. And what began as a war for dominance became something else entirely, something the human mind was never meant to reconcile. By autumn, both sisters were pregnant. By winter, the colonel was dead. And by spring, the house itself began to rot from the inside, not from time, but from the infection of what they had created. The deeper you go into the story of Bell River Plantation, the more you feel something unnatural moving beneath the surface, not just the cruelty of men, but something older. When Marcus's writings were later discovered in fragments, they weren't written like a slave's journal. They were written like confessions, coded and frantic, describing dreams that came true, mirrors that didn't reflect correctly, and voices that spoke through the mouths of sleeping women. He said the twins, Clara and Celeste Sutton, used him not only as a body, but as a vessel. They believed conception through shared blood would grant them something divine. Their mother had died giving birth to them, and their father, Colonel Sutton, buried her under the sycamores with a ring that legend said was cursed, a family heirloom smuggled from the Caribbean during the old trade. The sisters found it and began to wear it alternately, claiming it whispered to them in the dark. By the winter of 1848, both sisters were pregnant. The townspeople whispered, but no one dared question a Sutton. Marcus tried to run. He wrote that he could no longer tell which sister he dreamed of at night, because they both came to him, their voices overlapping, their movements synchronized like mirrors turned inward. The plantation doctor recorded that their pregnancies advanced at impossible speed, and that when he examined them, both women spoke in a language he couldn't identify. He resigned 2 days later and was never seen again. Neighbors began to complain of cries echoing from the fields long after midnight. Some swore they saw figures walking the property line, pale and doubled, and then, one night, Colonel Sutton ordered all the servants into the main house. He locked the doors from the outside. The next morning, he told the sheriff there had been a fever outbreak and that the plantation would be quarantined. For the next month, no one entered or left Bell River. When the sheriff finally arrived, summoned by smoke on the horizon, the house was silent, its windows blackened, its fields abandoned. What Marcus described in his final entry wasn't fire. It was purification. He wrote, "They said we would be one body before sunrise, and when the ring burned, the walls began to breathe. When the fire consumed Bell River Plantation, most assumed it was divine punishment, a convenient cleansing of something too shameful to speak aloud. But what the public didn't know was that federal investigators reopened the case more than a century later, in 1963, after sealed testimonies were discovered in the archives of an abolitionist society in Philadelphia. Those files, marked confidential, Sutton Estate, had been hidden for over 100 years. Inside were letters from townspeople, statements from runaway slaves, and one medical report from a midwife named Lydia Parr. Together, they painted a portrait of something more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. According to Lydia's account, when she was summoned to the plantation that final night, she found both sisters in labor but not in separate rooms. They were joined at the wrist by iron shackles, their hands blistered, their bodies trembling. Marcus lay unconscious beside them, his chest rising shallowly, blood soaking the dirt floor beneath him. Lydia claimed that the air inside that room felt wrong thick, humming, as if charged by unseen currents. The sisters were speaking the same words at the same time, but their eyes were rolled white, their voices distorted. Lydia wrote, "It was like one spoke, and the other echoed from somewhere far away, like an empty church repeating a prayer that should not be said." When the children were finally born, they were not twins but identical infants with identical birthmarks, one on the left shoulder, one on the right. Both sisters screamed the same name, Marcus. Then the ring on Celeste's hand began to glow red, so hot it fused into her skin. Lydia fled that night, leaving the newborns behind. The next day, the house burned. In 1963, forensic teams excavating the site uncovered a crypt beneath the foundation that hadn't appeared on any plantation blueprints. Inside were 3 skeletons, 2 adult women, their wrists fused together by melted iron, and 1 male taller, with a shattered jaw and signs of restraints. But deeper still they found 2 smaller coffins. Empty, and here's where the record ends abruptly. The report was sealed again by state order, citing public psychological safety. No one was supposed to read this, no one was supposed to know. Before we go deeper, before you hear what the witnesses described after that discovery, I want you to comment this phrase below: "I am not afraid of the dark that remembers me." Write it once to show you're awake. Write it twice to seal your place among those who dare to look. The Sutton bloodline was supposed to have ended that night. Every record erased, every trace of Bell River plantation buried under ash and silence. But history has a way of bleeding through the soil, no matter how deep you try to hide it. When the archives reopened in 1987 for digitization, a clerk at Auburn University came across a sealed parcel labeled "Do Not Catalog Sutton." Inside were letters written in the 1920s by a woman named Clara Bell, who claimed to be the granddaughter of the sister who survived. Her words are what turned myth into something disturbingly real. Clara wrote, "They say my grandmother burned with the house, but my mother carried fire in her eyes. She never grew old. Her blood stayed young, her hair the color of rusted gold, her eyes green like glass underwater. She told me never to have children. She said our line was cursed not by God, but by something older." For decades, people dismissed her as delusional, but Clara's blood tests, taken posthumously in 1959, revealed a genetic anomaly so rare it didn't match any known population in the region. A peculiar mutation affecting pigmentation, regenerative cell cycles, and adrenal response, the same traits noted in the Marcus documents, from 1849. Scientists described it as an inherited resilience bordering on the unnatural. Then, in 1996, a journalist named Daniel Crane traced Clara's lineage to a quiet Alabama town near the original plantation site. He found a family living under changed names, descendants of the Sutton Twins, unaware of their own history, until they began to experience something strange, shared dreams of a burning house, of a man chained to the floor whispering, "You belong to me." DNA testing confirmed the impossible a genetic match across 3 separate families in different counties, all with identical mitochondrial markers tied to the Thornhill sample discovered in Georgia decades earlier. 2 plantations, 2 bloodlines, 1 origin. That night, Daniel Crane went missing. His final note, left on a typewriter in his motel room, read, "They were never sisters. They were reflections, 2 vessels for 1 will." The local sheriff's report said the room smelled faintly of iron and smoke. The carpet beneath the desk was scorched in the shape of 2 linked hands. This story, this infection of lineage and memory, isn't just folklore. It's something deeper, a design that keeps repeating itself through generations, as if testing the edges of control. By the time federal interest in the Sutton lineage surfaced, the story had already crossed from superstition into something far more controlled. In 2002, the Department of Behavioral Genetics quietly launched a program under the name Project Persephone. Officially, it was an academic collaboration with Auburn University's medical school to study regional genetic persistence. Unofficially, it was about the Sutton blood. Files declassified in 2019 reveal that what they found was not just a biological curiosity, it was a psychological frequency. The surviving Sutton descendants all shared the same inexplicable pattern. Their brainwave signatures, recorded during sleep, emitted an identical resonance between 3:08 and 3:11 a.m., a frequency matching Schumann resonance fluctuations often associated with electromagnetic storms. Except these readings occurred on clear nights, no lightning, no interference, just human brains whispering the same silent code. The project's lead researcher, Dr. Evelyn Maris, noted in her report, they dreamed the same dream, a burning house, a man behind a door, a child saying we are one. The psychological network between them appears intergenerational, operating independently of location, time, or awareness. By 2006, 5 subjects had either vanished or died under unexplained circumstances. The remaining participants were institutionalized at federal facilities under the guise of psychiatric care. Dr. Maris herself disappeared 6 months later after contacting a journalist with what she called evidence of continuity. Her last recorded statement before the audio feed cut off was, "The twins weren't the beginning, they were a reawakening, and now here's where it gets darker." In 2013, a private biotech firm named Neurodyne Systems, founded by former government researchers, patented a technology called neural ancestral memory synchronization. Their earliest test groups, all from Alabama. Everyone a direct descendant of the Sutton plantation families. Coincidence or continuation? You see, the deeper you go, the more you start to realize something chilling. The real control systems of history were never political, never religious, never economic. They were biological, blood as a vessel for memory, DNA as the archive of domination. Before we move on, I want you to pause right here, take a deep breath. If you've made it this far, you're not just watching, you're remembering. Comment this phrase below twice to lock in your transformation. The blood remembers. Repeat it twice. That's not for me, it's for you, to mark the point of no return.